I'm Polly Warren and welcome to the Positive Perimenopause podcast. This is the place for some positive inspiration to help you through the rollercoaster ride of perimenopause. I truly believe that with the right support, knowledge and wellness tools, you can feel your best yet, because I'm learning this life phase can be a truly exciting and often pivotal time of life. With every episode, my mission is to support and empower you to own your menopause, because it's time to start taking care of the most important person, and yes, that's you. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with me. Now let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the podcast with me, your host, Polly Warren. How are you? I hope you've had a good week. Well, I had a very funny weekend. I went to Scotland with Giles, my husband, for his colleague's 60th birthday celebrations. And when we got the invitation to this party, the dress code was informal national dress. Now, we didn't really know what that meant. I mean, Michael is Scottish and his wife is Austrian. So we thought, okay, well, it's obviously some sort of national dress, but it said informal. It wasn't formal national dress. Anyway, so I said to my husband, I said to Giles, go and ask Michael, what does it mean? But Michael wasn't giving him anything and just said, good luck to you, English. But we got the impression that it was a dressing up kind of party. And Giles and I love a bit of fancy dress and dressing up. So we started thinking what we could go as. Anyway, long story short, we ended up going as... Because what do you do for an English national dress? We don't have one, and particularly informal. So it was Giles's idea that we were going to go in 1980s style, very shiny, very flammable, very sweaty, brightly coloured shell suits. So we got those, we kind of got our costumes ready, and we arrived in Edinburgh, and I suddenly started getting cold feet, saying to Giles, are you sure it's fancy dress rather than just, some sort of costume? He's like, no, it'll be fine. And I thought, because he's worked with Michael for 25 years, he would know. So we were all meeting in the evening at about 6:30 to get on a bus to the venue of where the party was. So Giles and I were in our shell suits. I had blue eyeshadow. I had the lot. I went to town. It was disgusting. It was the most unflattering outfit I think I've ever worn. But I did put a pair of pink high heels on to try and glam it up a little bit. But I don't think they did. So we arrived at the bus and I looked around and my heart sank because we were the only people in ridiculous outfits. Everybody else looked very formal. They definitely hadn't read the brief. So we had a little word with each other and Giles was just like, do you know what? We've just got to own it. We're in it now. We've got to own our costumes. And that's exactly what we did, although we had absolutely no option not to. But I did really shock myself. I was so out of my comfort zone and I just had to get on with it. Out of about 120 people, there were 2 Indian headdresses. There were 2 probably not very appropriately dressed, typical kind of French people. And that pretty much was it. There were lots of kilts and there were a few Austrian outfits. But other than that, everyone else looked incredibly sensible and actually looked very formal. So, yeah, we were a little bit disappointed by that. But do you know what? I actually had such a fun night. Everybody talked to us. Everyone was very kind to us and thought it was hilarious. And despite the fact I was sitting between a smartly dressed heart surgeon and banker, both in suits at dinner, I actually forgot halfway through what I was wearing. And it just goes to show it's not really about what you wear, it's how you wear it. I must admit, I was exhausted at the end of the night because it took everything out of me to kind of just own that costume. But I did it and I was really, really proud of myself. So on to this week's episode, which is with the gorgeous Jo Darling. Jo is a natural health specialist. She's also an acupuncturist. I'm the creator and founder of the Menopoised Menopause magnet, which is such an incredible little thing. It's highly effective in reducing the frequency and intensity of hot flushes and night sweats during menopause. So we talk in this episode, we talk about Jo's own transition through menopause. We talk about the positive effect that stopping drinking has had on her life, and how acupuncture can really help with the menopause transition, as well as how she created this incredible magnet. So without further ado, please welcome the absolutely incredible Jo Darling. Hello, Jo. It is a real privilege to have you on the podcast today. I'm very excited to have this conversation.
Hello, Polly. Lovely to see you too. And we're only around the corner from each other, aren't we?
I know, it's brilliant. All these amazing wellness people in Brighton. They just keep on giving. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. There's a whole lot of us.
So, Jo, I thought a really good place to start today would be to hear a little bit more about you. And I mean, there's so much we're going to talk about: acupuncture, menopause. But let's start with you, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your own menopause story and how it's been, and if there's any really good solutions that you found for yourself.
Well, my menopause journey is quite interesting because at the age of 30, I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, which is a form of arthritis that only a small percentage of people that have psoriasis get. Psoriasis is a skin issue, in case people aren't aware of what it is. And it took a long time to get diagnosed, but what it did when I was and I was quite young to be diagnosed with it. What it did was it focused me on finding a solution to support my health, really, because the options were that or quite a lot of Western medicine, which I didn't particularly want to take, although I have taken subsequently at times in my life when I've needed that kind of support. And so I worked with a nutritionist and cut out a whole bunch of foods, supplemented a whole load of other stuff, and it really, really helped. In fact, it helped me manage for many, many years. And then fast forward, I had my son. He was probably 2 or 3. And I had low mood, low energy. And it's interesting because talking to other people, it sounds like possibly that was perimenopause. It was the very beginning of my early 40s. I had my son quite late. And my osteopath at the time recommended I go and see a local, she was a doctor, nutritionist, homeopath, and coach as well. And I thought, well, she sounds really well rounded. I'm not going to get foisted and have stuff suggested to me that I don't want to take. Anyway, she did some blood tests on me and came up with, excuse me, she said, I think you might be a little bit low on progesterone. I'd like to give you progesterone. And this might sound really mad, but or odd for somebody like me, but I share this because I hope other women will learn from it. At that point, I mean, we are talking a couple of decades ago, it didn't occur to me that progesterone was a hormone replacement. We know it's a hormone, but I didn't think of it as HRT because it didn't come in a packet that said HRT on it. So I started taking it, and to be honest with you, it didn't really make much difference to me. And then I started to have Chinese herbs for the arthritis. And the herbalist said to me, why are you taking that? And I said, well, I don't really know. It doesn't really seem to be doing much for me. And he said, well, just stop. So I stopped and I got the worst hot flushes and night sweats ever. And that was my experience of HRT, that I was probably taking something I didn't need to take. And when I stopped taking it, I found out the power of it because my body had adjusted. And without that extra, surge of it, I got these really awful symptoms. And as we know, it just took a little time for my body to rebalance itself because that's what the body is absolutely brilliant at. And the hot flushes and night sweats stopped. And I didn't really think much more about menopause. And then as an acupuncturist, I've been an acupuncturist for over a decade now. We look at the whole picture of Chinese medicine. So treating my patients, that's where I've really begun to learn about menopause. So many of my patients, I specialise in oncology acupuncture. So many of them are going through cancer treatment and often chemotherapy, which for those that don't know, sends you into immediate menopause, which, for us, if we're having a inverted commas, normal menopause, our hormones dwindle slowly. But for these people, they disappear overnight, and it can, the issues can be quite significant. And so they have really taught me, because you just see it so clearly, so much about menopause. And obviously, I've had additional training and all the rest of it in menopause and in treating cancer to be in the position I'm in. So that was my experience, really. And in terms of one thing, I mean, we talk, don't we? We'll talk about menopause. We talk about there's so much going on. I often use the expression shit sandwich because often we've got elderly parents and demanding children, whatever age they are. And for many women, they're at the height of their career, often in an office space, or even if they're not at the height of their career, they have a lot of experience in the work they've been doing, probably do it in their sleep. But these other issues come along and kind of, take their feet from underneath them. I'm having a menopause moment because I have no idea how I got onto that bit. We're talking about life experience. That's right. Where I was. This happens to me a lot. I get really into something and I digress. So you'll have to pull me back, and then I forget what I was talking about.
It's all right. So, we all do it.
Yeah, God, don't we? So yeah, I mean, so I'm 53 now. I'm postmenopausal. I went into lockdown still bleeding, and I came out of lockdown postmenopausal. Well, not quite, but the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But in that time, over the last 4 years, I think it's 5 years ago, I stopped drinking alcohol. And I've got to say that's one of the most profound changes I've ever made in my life. And a lot of what I understand about nutrition, because as an acupuncturist, it's not just sticking needles in people. We learn the whole of Chinese medicine, and we learn a lot of Western medicine as well, because we live in a Western world, so we have to translate. So we understand this thing called yang sheng, which is the nourishment of life. So it doesn't just talk about, it talks a lot about what you eat, how you live your life, the exercise you undertake, the joy in your life, the amount of sex you have. I can talk about that endlessly. But so I understand yang sheng and probably have my life quite relatively well balanced because I understand it. And I eat well because of my arthritis. And I stopped drinking because if I didn't, I think drinking was going to stop me, which is, a very honest thing to say. I think many women, have been in the last decade or two brought up on this, it's wine o'clock. And actually that's just really helpful, I find. So I stopped drinking anyway. And I really put the stopping drinking down to how I transitioned so well normally. I mean, I'm not holding myself up as perfect in any way, but that really helped me. And since I stopped drinking, I've been through some massive life changes. I split up with my husband. My father died a year later. There's been a whole raft of life experiences which I've dealt with sober.
What is it about the drinking which you think made such a difference? Is it I mean, it's probably loads of things, isn't it? It's the effect of the alcohol on the body itself, right? But I suppose also the not waking up feeling pretty horrible. A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
Time that you get back as well, because a lot of times if you're only starting drinking at tea time when you're cooking, that's probably the rest of the evening gone because you can't think straight about things. Whereas now I love studying, so I'm always reading books or trying to learn something, and I spend a lot of my time doing that in the evenings. But the thing so from a Chinese medicine perspective, the thing with the liver that's, well, any perspective really, is it's processing hormones. And it's also there to detoxify. So if you're not giving it the opportunity to, basically, if it's going to choose between sorting your hormones out or sorting out toxins, which can be similar sort of things, ultimately, it's going to save your life and sort the toxins out. Yeah. So it's not going to help you with your hormones, which can then potentially get reabsorbed and cause all sorts of issues. But from a Chinese medicine perspective, what alcohol does is it heats the body up, and estrogen or yin you can roughly translate estrogen into yin in Chinese medicine, is really cooling and moisturizing and nourishing. And if you're just adding heat into that, you're just drying everything up. You're kind of exacerbating the change that you're already going through. You're sort of speeding it up and drying everything out. And so there's also emotional issues as well around the liver. So in Chinese medicine, we don't separate the mind from the body, and every organ has its own emotion attached to it. And the liver is about anger and frustration. And, there's a hell of a lot of that goes on in midlife, isn't there?
Oh yes, there is an awful lot of that.
Yeah.
And you're right. And particularly if you've had a night out and you've been drinking, you're so much more irritable and more likely to fly off the handle. It makes so much sense. And is the liver then responsible for night sweats and hot flushes as well as hormones?
It can be. I mean, all of the organs work together, so it only takes one to be out of kilter to set another one off. And when it comes to hot flushes and night sweats, there's probably about 6 different types of them. So, if a woman came to me, I would be looking at, diagnosing. We always look for the root of the problem, so it's always specific to that person. So, the other thing that affects the liver is stress. So if I have a woman who's particularly stressed, or drinking a lot of alcohol as really simple examples, then I would know that we needed to work on her liver, but it wouldn't happen in isolation. All of the organs feed each other, and it's actually the kidneys that feed the liver in Chinese medicine. And the kidneys relate to life itself, really. They do so many things in Chinese medicine, but they're responsible for the cycles in our life. So we see for women, it's the 7-year cycle. So age 14, they get their periods. Age 49, they start their menopause. I know those dates aren't quite right, but considering this was written thousands of years ago, it's pretty much there. And the kidneys are responsible for that. And they are, one aspect of the kidneys is very yin, so very estrogenic. One aspect is yang, but it's the kidney yin that's depleting. And this is the natural process of age. And as our yin and our kidneys, it's called Jing actually, as this diminishes as we get older, eventually we run out and we die, and that's really normal. That's life. So controversially, sometimes I say, menopause isn't a thing in Chinese medicine, and people are bloody horrified. It's not that I don't believe menopause is a thing or Chinese medicine doesn't recognize it, but it sees it as part of aging. It's not separated from it, because it's the same thing. It just expresses itself differently between women and men, in the same way as our fertility expresses itself differently between women and men. And so all we're ever looking at is how to age well, how to nourish our lives. And there's so muit's involved in that, isn't there? So the short answer to your question about is it the liver that's involved in hot flushes is sometimes. But mostly it's the kidneys will be the root of a lot of that problem.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, because when I was a stressed out teacher, and I was definitely drinking too much at that time, I never had a hot flush ever, but I had a huge number of night sweats, the horrible ones when you literally wake up and you feel like someone's poured a bucket of water over you, and it's just horrible. Horrible. And it was really only once I got on top of my stress and I really wasn't drinking as much that they disappeared. And so that's, I mean, and that obviously that kind of goes to show that those things are really such a big part of it.
Yeah, looking at your life. And the other thing I think is interesting about menopause is that it is a stress in itself. We bandy the word stress around a bit too freely sometimes, don't we? But it's a stress. Stress is change, or change is stress, whichever way you want to look at it. And the body's trying to adapt to this change and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. So, you're already in a state of stress in your body. And the other thing that I'm not sure everybody realizes as well is that I know estrogen isn't the be all and end all, but it does have, I think it's something like 300 functions in 400 different parts of the body. So it's pretty huge in what it does. So the process of menopause is that, our eggs dwindle. We run out of eggs, and mostly we're getting our hormones from our eggs. And so eventually the eggs are gone, but there's 3 types of estrogen. There's one that you get when you're fertile. There's one that you get when you're pregnant, and there's one that you get when you are past your fertile years. That's really simplistic, and I'm sure a doctor will pull that apart. But basically
Yeah.
speaking, that's the case. But this new estrogen that we're creating is created mostly in our adrenal glands.
Yeah.
And in Chinese medicine, that relates to our kidneys. So, absolutely, if you are stressing your adrenal glands by anything, alcohol, sugar, caffeine, or external stresses, you're depleting your kidneys more because you're draining your adrenal energy.
Yeah.
So, again, I love Chinese medicine because really we're all saying the same thing, just using different language. But I love the fact that they knew it thousands of years
It's
ago.
amazing, isn't it? I love it. I love it.
Now, but yeah, so that's why, and I think that's one of the really important things when you talk about menopause. It's not, just to say blanketly reduce stress and cut down your alcohol. I mean, a lot of people are going to go, how do I do that? I have that a lot with my patients. Yeah, how am I going to do that? Well, actually, it can be really hard, and there are some massive life changes that possibly need making, and you have to be brave.
There are some lifestyle changes which do need to happen. And I do think that is where lots of people come unstuck, because they become so overwhelmed with what on
Yeah.
earth do I do?
Yeah.
And that is why I do what I do. So I help people to make those changes in a way which feels sustainable, long lasting, and as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just like, you end up doing nothing, because you just are like, and because you're not feeling great at the same time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about acupuncture. So I was thinking about acupuncture when I first came across it. So I used to live just a few doors down from one of my oldest friends, and her dad was a doctor, but he was also an acupuncturist. And this is like in the sort of 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And I remember I must have been about 7 or 8. I was really not very old. And I thought at the time it was a really brilliant idea to go to bed in my full school uniform, which at the time had really stiff collar and tie, because then I could just jump out of bed and be ready for school. But one morning I woke up and I literally could not move my neck. It was kind of completely to one side. Obviously, it wasn't a great idea going to bed in my school uniform. And so my mum walked me up to see my friend's dad, and I had my first ever hockey match that day, and I remember I was just like, I'm gonna play, I have to play, I wanted to play. So he just sort of sat me down, and he just ended up, and because I kind of knew him and stuff, and I didn't freak out at all, but he ended up just literally putting in a load of needles into me, and it was as if by magic I suddenly was like so much better, and I ended up playing that hockey match.
Amazing.
And it was a real kind of like, it just opened my eyes to something else. And then every time I was at their house a lot, around their kitchen table, and he would always be asking me, so how are you today, Polly? And if I just mentioned something, he'd come with his needles. Suddenly shove one in. It was completely bonkers. But so I kind of knew that it worked, and it was something special right from an early age. So a lot of people obviously don't know what it is. And as you alluded to before, lots of people just think it is just about sticking needles in. But maybe you could explain to the listeners, what it is, what is acupuncture, and how can it help, particularly during menopause?
I'm glad you had a good experience. It's wonderful. I love the fact that I think that's one of the things that attracts some GPs towards acupuncture. The fact that I think it must be really tough that, when people come to you, you can only give them something to walk away with. You can't actually make a difference as they leave the room type thing. And I think it's one of the massive appeals of acupuncture. So, excuse me, the premise of acupuncture is based on Chinese medicine, and Chinese medicine, as I mentioned earlier, is it's really complex. It's often counterintuitive. We live in a Western world, so the way the West's lens of the body is very different to the Chinese lens of the body, and we're very much about the idea that that there's no separation between the mind and the body, for starters. And actually, beyond that, there's no separation from the body and the rest of the world. So nature is no different to us. And we look to nature, and we often describe things in terms of nature. And that's how the medical model is made up. And we look outside the window and we go, oh, it's autumn. The leaves are falling off the trees. We're preparing for harvest. We're heading towards winter where it's going to be dark, and it's time to hibernate. And that's how we should be living. It's about living in line with what you see all around you. So not going against nature and eating in line with nature, and that whole thing. So it's a very rounded thing. So in terms of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, there's lots of different styles of acupuncture, but we often talk about there being these different organs. So we have 12 that we talk about. In fact, we have 11 anyway, but we have 12 meridians. So each organ has its own line or meridian on the body, and each organ has its own kind of, I like to think of them as like little people in a way. So I've already mentioned the liver. The liver's sort of characteristics can be quite aggressive. It rises upwards. Often, in menopause situations, you'd see possibly rage or hot flush raging up. Whereas something like the spleen is much more. A spleen is a digestive organ. It's much more nourishing, nurturing. It's quite a motherly kind of thing. It's predisposed to being a little bit weak and attacked by the liver because they all have these little relationships. And so each organ has its own. So the spleen's job is to take the food in and transform it into usable energy and send it around the body. So if someone doesn't have enough energy or they've got cold extremities, then there's a good chance that their spleen is out of kilter if they're putting on weight. If they've got brain fog, it's a good chance that they're just not digesting things properly. So the diagnosis for acupuncture and Chinese medicine is we look at people's tongues, and the tongue tells you so much. You'd be surprised at the difference in people's tongues. If they've got an issue with their spleen, very often their tongue is very swollen. They've got scallops down the side. So I could look at the tongue and go, right, spleen, we need to treat that. If they've got more night sweats and they've got a big yin deficiency, particularly the kidneys, their tongue is going to be quite dry and thin and often red. So the tongue is a fantastic way of diagnosing people. And then we use the pulse as well. So each point, there's 3 points on the pulse, and each point relates to a different organ. So we're forming a diagnosis, which can be very complicated. And then we're figuring out which points we can use to change that diagnosis. So, for example, if someone had a lot of pain, like you did, we call that chi stagnation. And so the liver would always be involved because it's got a free flow energy. So we'd use a point to free flow the energy around. So it's a question of looking at different organs, figuring out which meridian is impacted, and then choosing some points to make that change. We feel the pulse at the beginning of an appointment to see what's going on, and then at the end, before we take the needles out, to make sure what we wanted to achieve has been achieved, and take it from there. And in China, an acupuncturist is a doctor, a general practitioner. And when you do your acupuncture, I have a degree in acupuncture. If you do a degree, you sign a piece of paper at the end to say you will never call yourself a doctor. And I wouldn't dare or dream to think of myself as a doctor, but it's not, you don't do different points for fertility to menopause to pains in shoulders. I mean, you do, but because you're looking at the root of the person, the imbalance that person has, that's what you really need to treat, because you have the root of the problem, and then you have all the branches. So the branches are the symptoms that you're seeing. So you can pretty much, mostly you can treat most things as long as you've got a good diagnosis. So, in menopause, that is a myriad of issues. So brain fog, anxiety, depression, energy, the whole thing, really.
And do you see those symptoms just dissipate after they've had treatment?
Well, it depends. I often say to people, I think one of the things I don't do is I don't use acupuncture for helping people to stop smoking or lose weight. And the reason for that is I don't like the idea that someone's handing their health over to me. It feels like that for me to sort them out type thing. I think you have to come to the party, and it's what you put in is what you'll get out.
Yeah.
As well. So That said, I have a lot of patients come to me once a year, once every 2, 3, 4 years, sometimes. Not a great business model, though it is sort of now. For hay fever, I don't know how come, but I have the magic touch with hay fever, and usually with one appointment, it's gone. And it might not be gone for the whole season. They might come back, or they might not come back for a couple of years, whatever. And they are the only patients I don't rebook because there's no point, because I don't need to see them again because it's
Yeah.
probably gone. But with something like menopause, depending, the way I look at it is it's the length of time you've had the problem and the consistency of the problem, so the extremeness of the problem. So if the problem is really extreme and you've had it for years, it's much harder to treat. So Chinese medicine is more preventative, particularly in China. And that's how I use it with the chemotherapy as well, actually. So I try and treat people before they have the chemotherapy, before they get the side effects, to try and prevent them having the issues. Not necessarily they've gone, but more manageable. And it's the same thing. Hopefully I'm treating women for years, and if we can get to the root of the problem, then they have a much easier transition. So yeah, you might need a course of treatments. You might have a short burst of it and then just come for boosts, as it were. Really depends on the individual.
It is a great option, isn't it?
Yeah.
To really get to that root. It is about treating the roots, and I think so often we just put a sticking plaster on it, treat the symptoms, and not get down to actually what is going on. So let's talk about menopoised. So what is menopoised, and how did it come about? Because it's just amazing. I love this story.
Thank you. So menopause came about because, as I mentioned, I work with cancer patients, and menopause myself. In fact, my best friend was just going through cancer treatment as well. And I noticed that a number of women weren't able to get to my clinic because their hot flushes were so terrible that they couldn't even get to see me. And I knew I could help them. So I looked around for a way that I could extend acupuncture but outside of the clinic walls without the use of needles, and found that actually, and a lot of acupuncturists do this, we've been using magnets for thousands of years, sometimes seeds as well, actually, and we place them on points to make a change in the body. So I found we have one point in the body which is exceptional for clearing heat. It's not necessarily, you wouldn't call it the menopause point or whatever, but there are certain points. There's one that you'd use for nausea, which you use C-bands for, and this just happens to be the point that we use for clearing heat. It's on the back of the neck. And so I started to use it in clinic, giving magnets to my patients, try this, see how you get on. And I realized it was really, really effective. I don't see it as what I see it as is a way of reducing hot flushes and night sweats so that women can then make extra changes in their life. So as I've said, acupuncture is broader than just one point. You can't, I don't think you just use the magnet and that's it. But like the feedback I get from women is that it's changing their lives. So there's the Menopoised Menopause magnet, which is the main sort of heroine product, we like to call it, which is literally a magnet that sticks on the back of the neck using plasters. And as we were saying earlier, the plasters come from the UK, so that I know what the ingredients are, and they're clear as well, so they're cool for any skin type. So whatever colour your skin is, it works for that. I trialed it. In fact, we've trialed it twice now. Second time around, we got exactly the same results, although we did the trial in a slightly different way because it's actually quite difficult. You can't do like the gold standard trial, which is, what a lot of Western medicine is based on, because you simply can't. Acupuncture and acupressure doesn't lend itself to that. But the second time we did it, we did something called, what's it called? Basically, you do the same trial, but you have people recording their symptoms without using the product, and then they have like a delayed start. So you can check the difference in those two groups. And what we found was that over 80% of women benefited from a reduction in either hot flushes and night sweats and the intensity or frequency of them. So there's sort of standard way of measuring those things. It was self-measurement, and that it was changing lives. And the second lot of she's lost the word, research that we did was actually with Surrey and Sussex Police. So that's a really stressful job, whether you're out on the beat or you're behind a desk. It's so I knew that was working, and I did that because I recognized that we live in a Western world and people are going to go, what are you talking about? Really? You're sticking a magnet on someone that's going to get rid of their hot flushes and night sweats? But it did, and it does. And, as I say, I get lots of messages from women saying it's changed their lives. So we have a magnet, but we also have aromatherapy blends as well, which are embrace cool, find calm, be collected. And they came about because I did some studying and found that actually you can combine the power and essence of plants. So that's your essential oils, which is like it's really strong and powerful because it's concentrated. You use their essence alongside an acupuncture point or a place on the body for certain things, and you combine these beautiful modalities to increase effectiveness. So, example, embrace cool, the oil. The instructions are to slather over your feet at night. Now, your feet are uh, represent your kidneys. So remember, I was talking about kidneys as we age. This is the thing we need to support. So you use the oil on your feet, on the to boost your kidney energy. If you're experiencing flushes during the daytime, you can smother it on your palms and inhale it. But actually, the nighttime thing really seems to work. And a lot of women say that they use it as part of their nighttime ritual. They're clean to get clean sleep, good sleep. And if we can reduce hot flushes and night sweats, then we're there, aren't we? Really, it's a massive intrusion into a lot of people's nights.
Yeah, because it's I think it's something like, is it 70% of women experience hot flushes, which is a huge,
Yeah, somewhere
huge
between 70 and
number.
80. Yeah, 80%. I think it depends whether you're talking about Europe or America. And then, of course, if you start talking about the Far East, it's quite different there because they
Yeah.
don't experience it
Yeah.
to the same degree, which is a whole other amazing conversation about culture and menopause, because I think that's massively overlooked. The stigmatism that we have aging. We forget that we're becoming wiser. We're becoming more important, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. It's this, the Chinese have got it right when they talk about the second spring,
Yeah.
because, Jo, you're an amazing example of this, because you've obviously redirected your energy from what you've done before, creating babies, all that sort of thing, now into something new, this new business, into
Yeah.
menopause, and
Yeah.
doing something that you love. Would you say that menopause actually has given you that sort of impetus and that fire in your belly to do all of that, get out of your comfort zone?
It totally has. I mean, the thing is, one of the lovely stories I like to tell about Chinese medicine is that so when we're creating blood, it's called tiangui in Chinese medicine, blood for periods. It's a combination of lots of different energetics, but basically we have this special meridian that runs between the heart and goes down to the uterus and sends energies to create blood in the uterus. And we also at the same time have energy coming up. I can never remember the different names of the bowel meridian, anyway, BAO, and it rises up from the kidneys to the uterus to meet the heart blood. So the heart and the kidney energy intermingle, and they sort of form this beautiful upright axis. But so they're creating this blood in our bellies for periods. When our periods stop, the kidney energy has got to go somewhere. So it starts rising up and it ends up in the heart. So the creativity it once gave to the uterus, it now gives to the heart and creates this beautiful wisdom, because the heart is the seat of all our emotions and our wisdom. So we still have the energy, it's just going in a different place. And totally, I would have said I was not creative in any way, shape, or form. Although when I say that to people, they're like, "Are you joking? You've always been creative." But I would never have known that. And I think that's partly to do with the divorce as well, which I also think is really important to talk about, because there's a lot of stigma around divorce. There's some unfair language that goes on around it, but that was a new lease of life for me. It was an opportunity to come into my own and not be defined as within the yin and yang that you have in the dance of a relationship. So
Yeah.
it was a real coming together of stopping periods, of becoming free, and not drinking. It was wonderful. And I just also I'm a massive advocate for women in general, always have been. I was a money broker. It was my first job when I graduated the first time when I was 21. And it actually broke me in the end. But one of the reasons I found it really hard to stop and had to be broken to stop working in the money markets was I didn't want to let women down. I didn't want men to be able to say, they can't hack it in this industry.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me. It was nothing to do with me being a woman, although that was an interesting space for a woman.
Mm.
It was the fact that it just wasn't for me. It was too high pressure. But so I've always, and seeing my patients really suffering through hot flushes and night sweats. And there's been so much change in the last couple of years, with the new focus on HRT. When I was starting all of this, that just wasn't there. And we really were fighting to talk about it. And thank God things are changing, because it's all about knowledge and information, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
And
it is. And so out of interest, I'm curious, what are your views on HRT?
I'm
Because,
pro-choice.
yes,
I
okay.
I and I'm pro-information. What I would say, which always makes me slightly chuckle, is I think the Chinese were one of the first to be using mare's urine as HRT, as of course you'd expect them to have done, because they still use placenta and in China. I mean, I've seen it because I've studied herbs, but we don't use any animal parts or bits in herbs in this country or in Europe. But of course, they're using everything, of course.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm not anti at all. I mean, I think moderation, this is one of the key tenets of Chinese medicine, moderation in all things, and I add to that, including moderation. So to be one way or the other, to be extreme is not helpful. And extreme emotion is an imbalanced emotion, so that's going to ultimately make you ill. So for me to get really cross about HRT wouldn't be serving me. And there are people out there who really, really, really need it. Where I have issues around it is the fact that I don't think everybody should be taking it from the age of 40. I certainly don't agree with rebranding menopause as a deficiency, because it's anything but, in my view. I also think that there's some responsibility to be taken for our own health as well. And I think, too often in the Western medical model, although I hear it's changing so much, with social prescribing, etc., but too often we hand ourselves over, and Western medicine tends to box things. It doesn't tend to look holistically, although that's again is changing, but it tends to send you to a gynecologist for this, or a foot person for that, whereas in Chinese medicine we just don't do that. So I'm loving hearing of a more holistic view in Western medicine. And and I know the NICE guidelines have changed recently, but I don't suppose they've changed that much from where they started, which was the first line of defence is lifestyle change.
Yeah.
So, and that I fully support. And of course, I fully support anyone that takes HRT. And that said, I treat women on HRT because it's not a silver bullet and it doesn't get rid of everything. So there's still room for complementary medicine alongside it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the message, isn't it? I do think because there's so much out there at the moment about HRT that a lot of people believe that, right, I've got my HRT, that's it, I'm fine, I've got my and I feel better, so that's it, I don't need to do anything else. But actually, as we, there are it's our long-term health which we're thinking of now, and the lifestyle changes do make a difference, and those menopause symptoms will return at some stage, HRT or no HRT, I believe, anyway. But
I think there is a strong argument for going through it, but it's so hard. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier, and absolutely the last place you want to be as a woman is in judgment of another woman, right? Because that's been going on for years, and I never want to be in that position. But what I want to do is explain what the knowledge I have to help women understand better. And this whole thing around alcohol and the resistance to cutting down or stopping and wanting to live the life you lived is totally understandable. I get it, but it's about having reality of who you are and where you're at, and the fact, I think a lot of this is fear of dying, if I'm really honest. And I get that, but we have to have a reality check sometimes.
Yeah, it's the acceptance bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's accepting where we are and that we are getting older. We aren't going to be, looking in how we did in our 20s, or we're not able to behave in the same way. I mean, for me, that was a massive step to actually come to that realization that this is it. I'm getting older, but now I've realized, now I've kind of got to that point. I think it's bloody amazing, because actually I feel so much freer than I ever did. I don't really give a fuck really about so many things I used to. And I think, if we can get women to that point, it's really, really so liberating. So yeah. So Jo, to finish, as I ask most of all my guests, because I like some people to be able to take away sort of something which they can put into practice straight away, have you got could you give one tip which is kind of actionable, which people could take away, which will really help them have a positive perimenopause? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here now.
Oh, well, the number one thing really that have banged on about as we've been talking, I mean, for me, it's cutting out the booze.
Yeah.
Cutting out the booze.
And what would you recommend for someone to be able to start doing that? Because again, it's the fear, I think for a lot of people, it's the fear of that situation, which so I still do drink alcohol. I don't really drink at all ever in the week. It's if I'm kind of going out or doing something. But I admit I've still got that fear if I'm going out and everyone else is drinking and I think, oh my God, I'm going to be really looked upon as really dull and boring. And I know really that that's ridiculous because,
Actually, pissed people are dull and boring.
Yeah.
Really fucking dull and boring. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, there's so much I could have chosen other than alcohol, but this morning I feel particularly passionate about it for some reason. I read a really fabulous book called Alcohol Explained, which was written by a lawyer, so not a doctor, and he'd sort of read up about himself, and he had just explained exactly what the alcohol is doing to the body. Because I firmly believe if we had our time again, alcohol wouldn't be legal because it does two really crazy things. It pumps you full of sugar and it stops you making sensible decisions. And as we know, sugar is highly addictive. So for anyone that eats food with sugar in, you've only got to take one mouthful. I don't do it very often. Well, I do more often than I'd like to. One mouthful, but you want to put the next bit in. So it's doing those two crazy things. It's just addicting you, and it's also stopping you thinking straight. So I read loads of books as well. There's quite a few books written by women about who've stopped drinking alcohol, about their lives and how it's changed their lives. I joined a great I think it was a Facebook group called Club Soda. I don't know if they're probably still going now. And it was just I never really posted on them, but it was just a place where people would go, oh, it's day one for me again. And people would be really encouraging. And I think you need that.
Yeah.
And cut yourself some slack. I mean, it's tough. You don't have to go the whole hog. I think the moderation, including moderation, is important because actually I'm really lucky. My best friend and many of my really good friends don't drink, or they don't drink much. So I don't find myself in a situation where people think I'm dull and boring. And importantly, I'm not actually that different when I'm sober to what I was like when I was shit-faced.
Okay.
Source of embarrassment for my son. But I didn't know that was me. I thought, I think pissed me is just me on repeat, smaller things just over and over.
Yeah.
But actually, the alcohol probably isn't making you any funnier or wittier. In fact, how many conversations have you really important? I've had important conversations that I don't remember, and I don't go back to friends and say, we talked about why you didn't have children. Well, I don't remember, and that's what I really hate.
Yeah.
So yeah. Don't be frightened. Try not to be frightened. And I was seeing a psychotherapist at the time I stopped, thinking that I would need them to help me with the fallout, because there's lots of mental, emotional. So probably somebody like you would be a really good support for someone, just to talk through what arises, because stuff does come up, but it's stuff that you've been pushing down with alcohol very often. So yeah, I would that, or drink more water.
Okay.
Because that flushes the hormones out, cools it down. But definitely water's important, and it's the flip side of alcohol in it. So there you go.
Thank you for everything today and all your wisdom, your amazing knowledge about Chinese medicine and menopause and acupuncture and Menopoised, which is very exciting. If anybody wants to find more about you and to get their hands on one of your magnets, where should they go? Where can they find it?
You can get it in lots of places, actually. You can find me at Menopoised on Instagram or Facebook, or I have a website, menopoised.co.uk. The magnet is available at Cult Beauty via Amazon or direct at menopoised.co.uk. And just to say, there is a new product coming out soon. It's called Cool and Calm Cream. So it combines both cool and calm. So keep an eye out for that. And also I'm going to start doing Chinese astrology health readings for people, which I've already started, testing it out with a few, and it's quite not shocking. It's quite amazing what it can tell you about yourself and how it can help you live more healthily. So watch this space for that as well.
Sounds amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll put all of that in the show notes. And yeah, thank you, Jo. It's been brilliant speaking to you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
So definitely go and check out Jo's website, particularly if you suffer with hot flushes or night sweats. So have a really good week. Just to say, if you want to get onto my mailing list, come over to my website, pollywarren.com. So for example, my letter, I send a weekly newsletter. This week, there will be a picture of me in that gorgeous, lovely shell suit I described earlier. Why wouldn't you want to see that? Not really. But anyway, if you want to come, you can sign up on my website. And also, just to let you know, I have a couple of spaces at the moment for one-to-one clients. And for those of you who are not sure what I do, I can really help you implement any diet and lifestyle changes which you might find tricky. A lot of us actually know what we need to do, but doing it is another thing. And there are many reasons for that. Behavior change is very difficult for us humans. It's not a natural thing for us to change something we've been doing for years and years. So I can really help you with that. But obviously I can help you find the pathway for you, which is going to help you feel as well as possible. For example, a recent client who's just started with me, actually, she came to me with absolutely no energy whatsoever. And even in a couple of weeks of working together, she can't believe how much more energy she's got. And it's just such a wonderful thing to see. Anyway, that is it for this week. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And I can't wait to chat to you next week. Bye.